My name is Monica Rivers, and I thought I knew what betrayal looked like, until my own sister abandoned her son like a piece of trash. One cold sentence shattered everything. He wasn't right. Now I'm going to raise that boy, and one day she'll see exactly what she threw away. Before we dive in, tell me, where are you watching this from? Drop your city or country in the comments. I love seeing how far these stories travel. The kitchen smelled like burnt onions and something older, something sour hiding beneath the grease on the stove. I stood there, frozen in the cluttered chaos of Ashley's Austin rental. Takeout boxes stacked on the counter, wine-stained dish towels crumpled on the floor, and I couldn't breathe. "Where is Ethan?" My voice was tight, nearly strangled by the question. I wasn't even sure I wanted to hear the answer. Ashley didn't flinch. She didn't even look at me. "I gave him up," she said flatly, picking at her chipped nail polish. "He wasn't right. There are moments in life that split you clean in half. Before and after, this was my after. You gave him up." I took a step forward. "To who?" she shrugged. "The shelter, you know, that one downtown, St. Joseph's or whatever." My knees nearly gave out. "You gave your own son away like he was a broken appliance." She finally looked up at me, and there was nothing in her eyes. No guilt, no panic, not even shame. Just that irritating calm she'd always wrapped herself in, like she was somehow above consequences. He screamed nonstop, wouldn't sleep, barely talked. "Something's wrong with him, Monica, and I can't do this alone. I'm not built for that kind of damage." "Damage?" I choked on the word. Her lips curled into a half-smile. "Don't make this dramatic. You've always been the one with the savior complex. Go save someone if it makes you feel better." I slapped the table so hard my palms stung. "He's not someone. He's your son." But Ashley had already turned her back. She reached for her wine glass like this was just another Thursday night, like she hadn't just detonated our family. I didn't wait. I couldn't. The front door banged behind me as I fled into the night. My heart pounded louder than the traffic on South Congress, louder than the sirens that always seemed to echo through this part of town. Where was he? What kind of shelter just takes in a boy like Ethan without calling family? And how long had he been there, silent, scared, maybe thinking no one cared? I'd always thought Ashley was reckless, selfish even, but this was a cruelty I couldn't have imagined. As I gripped the steering wheel with shaking hands, one truth settled deep in my bones. If she didn't want Ethan, then he was mine now. She would regret this. Not out of vengeance, but because one day she'd see what that boy could become, and she'd know it was her who chose to miss it. The next morning, the fluorescent lights of St. Joseph's Children's Shelter hummed above me like a warning. Everything in the building felt too bright, too clean, like it was trying too hard to cover up the sadness it held inside. The receptionist glanced at me like she'd seen 100 versions of this scene, people showing up late, desperate, maybe guilty. "He's down the hall, room 4B, he hasn't spoken to anyone." I nodded, gripping the strap of my purse until my knuckles turned white. "Thank you." As I walked, my heels clicked against the linoleum, echoing through the sterile hallway. Each step felt like a lifetime. I kept picturing him as the last time I saw him, Ethan, 7 years old, with those big brown eyes and a shy grin, always drawing something with his markers. But I didn't know who I was about to find. The door to room 4B creaked as I pushed it open. He was sitting on a cot, knees hugged to his chest, his back to the window. He didn't look up. "Ethan," I whispered. Nothing. Just the quiet rise and fall of his shoulders. I knelt down slowly, lowering myself to his eye level. "It's Aunt Monica, I came to take you home." He turned then. His face was pale, lips dry and cracked, dark circles painting his eyes. His expression didn't change. He just stared, blank and unreadable. But when I held out my hand, he didn't pull away. I kept it there, trembling slightly, afraid to break whatever invisible thread was between us. After a long moment, he placed his small hand into mine. The ride back to my house was quiet. I had turned off the radio after the first few minutes. He didn't speak. He didn't look out the window. Just sat, buckled in, eyes on his lap like he was bracing for something. I caught myself glancing at him at every red light, wondering what he was thinking, wondering if he was thinking anything at all. The silence scared me more than tears ever could. When we pulled into my driveway, I looked back at him gently. "We're here." Still nothing. He followed me into the house like a shadow, silent, hesitant, small. I led him to the kitchen, motioned for him to sit at the table. He didn't. Just stood there, arms crossed tightly, eyes darting around like he was calculating an escape route. I thought maybe we'd start with soup. Something warm, you hungry? No answer. I moved slowly, deliberately. Poured tomato soup into a pot, stirred it over low heat, trying to make the house smell like comfort. Like home. He watched me from the doorway, or maybe he watched the door behind me. I couldn't tell. When the soup was ready, I set a bowl in front of him. Added crackers, sliced up an apple just in case. He didn't touch it. You don't have to eat if you don't want to, I said softly, sitting across from him. But it's here. You don't owe me anything, Ethan. I'm just glad you're here. I didn't push. I didn't ask questions. I just sipped my soup slowly, let the warmth spread through me, pretended I wasn't unraveling inside. 10 minutes passed, then 15. And then he reached out, one cracker, then two. Finally, he dipped his spoon into the soup tentatively like it might bite back and brought it to his lips. He chewed slowly, swallowed, then did it again. I had to blink fast to keep the tears from falling. Later, I showed him the guest room, told him it was his now. He didn't speak, but he stepped inside, looked at the bookshelf, the soft quilt I'd laid out, the nightlight I'd plugged in last minute just in case. He didn't say thank you, but he didn't hide from it either. That night, I sat just outside his door with a book I couldn't focus on. I didn't hear him cry. I didn't hear him breathe. But around midnight, I peeked in one last time. He was curled under the blanket, half hidden, one arm tucked under his cheek. His shoes were still on. I wanted to walk over, tuck him in properly. But I didn't. Instead, I whispered from the doorway, "Sleep well, buddy, you're safe here." And for the first time in what felt like forever, I almost believed it myself. It was the third morning in a row I found the hall closet door cracked open just enough for a small body to slip through. I didn't open it right away. Instead, I knelt outside it, rested my palm lightly on the doorknob, and said gently, "I'm gonna make pancakes. You can stay in there if you want, or come help me crack eggs, your choice." No answer. But about 20 minutes later, I heard tiny footsteps on the tile floor. He stood in the kitchen doorway, hair mussed, eyes still wary. "Blueberries or plain?" I asked, flipping a pancake. He hesitated. Then he pointed silently at the little blue bowl on the counter. Blueberries. Progress, I told myself. Tiny, delicate progress. The days that followed were full of moments like that. Brief flickers of trust that vanished if I reached too quickly. He didn't talk. Not once. Not even a nod or shake of his head. Sometimes he would sit on the floor behind the living room couch, knees tucked up, head down, just existing. Other times, I'd find his small body wedged under the guest bed, his eyes open, unmoving, watching the shadows on the wall. Touch was another line I learned not to cross. The first time I accidentally brushed his arm while handing him a plate, he jerked back so hard the cup tipped and spilled. I apologized a dozen times, not for the mess, but for the fear. That fear was real, tangible. It lived in his shoulders. In the way he kept his hands to himself, in how he never turned his back, not even in sleep. He started sleeping with the closet light on. I didn't ask why. I just bought a brighter bulb. One night, a storm rolled through Austin, those loud spring ones that rattle the windows and flash across the sky like gods making a statement. I found him huddled behind the armchair, his face pale, breathing shallow. I didn't move closer, didn't reach for him. I just sat down on the floor a few feet away and waited. "It's just thunder," I said softly. "Nothing here's gonna hurt you." He didn't blink. After a minute, I picked up one of his crayons. He'd left a few scattered earlier and began doodling on a scrap of notepad. A house, a tree, a stick figure with huge hair. "I used to be scared of storms too," I said. "When I was little, I'd hide under the table and pretend I was in a spaceship." Still nothing. But he hadn't moved away either. I drew a second stick figure next to mine, smaller, with big round eyes. I slid the notepad across the floor, slow and careful. He stared at it. Then, just before the next thunderclap cracked across the sky, he picked up the blue crayon and colored in the sky behind us. That night, after he fell asleep, curled up in the middle of the bed like a kitten, I sat on the edge of the mattress and watched him breathe. How could Ashley see anything but possibility in this child? Yes, he was quiet. Yes, he was scared. But beneath that, beneath the layers of silence and skittishness, was something deep and unformed. like a pearl still hidden in the shell. She hadn't even tried. She didn't wait long enough to see that this was a boy who could turn pain into something else entirely, if only someone stayed long enough to witness it. "You don't have to talk," I had told him earlier that evening, as we sat in the backyard watching the wind move the trees. "You don't even have to smile. Just know you're safe here, okay?" He didn't respond. But when I handed him a grilled cheese sandwich, he took it. And when I handed him a paper towel, he wiped his own mouth without being asked. Tiny, impossible victories. It was around that time I began journaling everything. Not because I was trying to keep records, but because I didn't want to forget. The way he tilted his head when he heard birds outside the window. The way he flinched when the neighbor's dog barked too loud. The way he pressed his fingers into Play-Doh like he was testing its resistance. He hadn't laughed, not once. But that was okay. We had time, we had space. And in this house, silence wasn't scary, it was sacred. 2 weeks had passed. 14 slow, cautious, silent days. But I was learning his rhythms, when he preferred to be alone, how long he could sit in the sun before becoming overstimulated, which foods he'd nibble on without being asked twice. Mostly, I learned how to wait. It wasn't a grand kind of patience. It was the kind you grow when there's no alternative. When a child won't look you in the eye, you stop asking him to. When he won't talk, you find other ways to listen. So when it happened, when the moment finally cracked through the quiet, there were no fireworks. No sudden tears or dramatic music, just a soft slip of paper on the table beside me and the sound of small feet padding back down the hallway. I stared at it for a full minute before touching it. It was a coloring page, pulled from one of the old science activity books I'd found at a yard sale last week. An anatomical heart, shaded carefully with red, blue, and purple crayon, not scribbled colored in, intentionally. But what stopped me, what truly made me forget how to breathe, were the tiny printed labels. Left ventricle, aorta, pulmonary artery, each one written in the unmistakably careful handwriting of a child trying to get it right. I blinked hard. My laptop screen went dim in the background, forgotten. "Ethan!" I called out, not loudly, just enough for it to reach down the hallway. He stepped back into view, standing just outside the glow of the desk lamp. His face was unreadable, but his eyes were steady. "You drew this?" I asked gently. He nodded, barely. Did you label these yourself?" A pause. Then, for the first time since I'd brought him home, I heard it, his voice. "I want to be a doctor." I don't remember standing up. I just know I was suddenly kneeling in front of him, holding the paper in both hands like it was a relic. "A doctor," I whispered. "That's amazing." He looked down at his socks. "I like hearts, they're complicated." I swallowed back a lump in my throat. "Yeah, they really are." We stayed there for a moment, suspended between past and future. For the first time, I saw something in him I hadn't dared to name before, a dream, not mine, his, not survival, but purpose. Later that night, I sat on the floor outside his room, knees hugged to my chest, the drawing still in my hand. I couldn't stop looking at it. I thought about how Ashley had said, he wasn't right. How she discarded this child like an unfit experiment, like he wasn't worth trying for. But this boy, he had dreams buried under silence. Ambition hidden in crayons. He didn't want to escape the world. He wanted to understand it, heal it. And all I could think was, how many more children like Ethan are out there, waiting for someone to notice they're not broken, just waiting. I didn't know how. I didn't know when. But I made a promise to myself that night. Whatever it took, whatever bridges I had to build, whatever systems I had to fight, I was going to get him to medical school. Because the world needed doctors like Ethan. And he needed someone who believed he could get there. I always thought the hardest part would be getting him to speak. But dreams come with price tags, and when I started researching what it actually costs to become a doctor, my chest tightened with every scroll. Undergrad. Pre-med requirements. MCAT prep. Medical school itself. Residency barely paid. I sat at the kitchen table late into the night, laptop open, calculator in hand, my heart sinking with every tab I opened. The numbers blurred. The total was 6 figures, probably more once you added in living expenses and books. I just finished paying off my car. I'd finally started putting something into savings. And now, all I could think was, how do you fund a miracle? Over coffee the next morning, I spilled everything to Trisha. Trisha had been my best friend since college, blunt, loyal and blessed with that rare ability to listen without interrupting. She leaned against my kitchen counter, stirring sugar into her mug while I talked myself in circles. "I want to help him," I said, wrapping both hands around my cup. "But how do you pay for med school when you're just barely getting ahead? I don't want to crush this before it even starts." He took a sip, then looked at me over the rim. "Moan, don't borrow trouble from the future." I raised an eyebrow. "That's your advice." "Look," she said, setting her cup down. "The kid just told you he wants to be a doctor. That's incredible. And instead of celebrating, you're panicking about student loans he won't even see for a decade, one step at a time." "But, no buts," she cut in. "You've already given him what he didn't have before: safety, encouragement, space to grow. The rest will come. And knowing you, you'll figure it out before he even hits high school." I wanted to believe her. God, I needed to believe her. The funny thing was, while I was quietly spiraling over money, Ethan had already started solving the first step on his own. He didn't tell me at first. I just found the flyers, stuffed between library books, taped to the side of his science notebook. Junior Innovators Science Fair, Young Scholars Competition, STEM Explorers Grant Program. One evening, as I was clearing the dinner table, I found a printed application tucked under his placemat, half filled, with his name written in neat block letters at the top. "Ethan," I called into the living room, "did you mean to leave this out?" He looked up from the couch where he was sketching something anatomical again. "It's for the regional fair," he said quietly. "They said you can win scholarship money." I stared at him, heart swelling. "You want to enter?" He shrugged, like it wasn't a big deal. "If you help me with the form." I smiled so wide it hurt. "I'll do more than that. We'll make a project board, get you a lab coat if you want, whatever you need." He blinked. "Really? Really?" I said, already pulling out my planner. "You dream big, kid. I'll worry about logistics." The next few weeks were a whirlwind. We transformed the garage into a makeshift science lab, complete with posters, glue sticks, and more paper towels than any human should reasonably need. Ethan dove into research like it was oxygen. He built a model heart valve from a 3D puzzle kit. He learned to explain blood flow with jelly beans and plastic tubing. He practiced his presentation in front of the mirror, whispering the words at first, then louder, with more confidence. One night, I overheard him in the hallway reciting, "The heart doesn't just keep us alive. It teaches us how to adapt. Even when pieces break, it finds a rhythm again." I covered my mouth to keep from crying. At the science fair, he wore a navy blue button-down and held my hand a little tighter than usual. He didn't win first place, but he placed third. And more importantly, his project qualified him for the state competition. Each time he got a ribbon, he taped it to the wall above his bed. I didn't need a crystal ball. I didn't need a financial planner to tell me what I already knew deep down. If there was a way, we'd find it. Together. The envelope didn't look like anything special. It was plain white, a little thicker than usual, no fancy seals or embossed lettering. Just our home address printed in black ink and a return address stamped Texas Future Scholars Program. I almost tossed it into the junk pile, figuring it was just another college prep flyer or donation request. But something made me pause. Maybe the weight of it. Maybe just motherly instinct, even if I wasn't technically his mother. I opened it standing in the driveway, groceries still in the back seat, keys dangling from my wrist. And for a few seconds, I forgot how to breathe. "Dear Mr. Ethan Davis," it began. Mr. I smiled despite myself. It went on to say he had been selected as one of the youngest recipients of the Future Scholars Grant, an award that would fully fund both his undergraduate pre-med studies and 4 years of medical school at any in-state institution of his choosing, so long as he maintained academic excellence. It even included a stipend for living expenses, books, and travel. My hands started shaking. I read it twice, then 3 more times. I leaned against the car just to keep from falling. Then I cried. Big, gasping, open-mouthed sobs in the middle of the driveway, right between the sidewalk and the rose bush that never bloomed properly. I didn't care who saw me. I had never in my adult life cried from joy. Until now. Ethan was at the dining table, finishing a sketch when I came inside, his pencil dark with shading, his brow furrowed with concentration. He looked up when I walked in. I must have still looked like a mess, red cheeks, smeared mascara, that dazed kind of half-smile you get when the world tilts in your favor. "What happened?" he asked quietly, setting the pencil down. I held out the letter with both hands. He took it, read it in silence, his lips moving as he processed each line. When he looked up, there was a flicker of disbelief in his expression. "This is real," he whispered. I nodded. "It's real." His hands trembled just slightly as he folded the paper and set it down. And then, for the first time since coming into my house, Ethan grinned. A full, unguarded, teeth-showing grin that lit up every corner of his face. I burst into tears all over again. "You did this," I said through a laugh. "You worked for this, Ethan. You earned it." He shrugged, still smiling. "You helped." "No," I said, stepping closer, placing a hand gently on his shoulder. "I believed you became." We celebrated with frozen pizza and sparkling grape juice that night. I let him pick the movie. He chose some old nature documentary with whales and glacier shots, and a narrator who sounded like he whispered everything. He didn't sit far from me this time. He leaned into the corner of the couch, one leg tucked under him, occasionally glancing over like he couldn't quite believe it was real. And honestly, neither could I. We didn't have to chase down scholarship committees anymore. We didn't have to juggle after-school jobs and midnight essays for every $500 grant we could find. For the first time since I'd found him in that cold shelter hallway, I could exhale. This wasn't just a financial win. This was freedom. Freedom to dream without limits. Freedom from the fear of failing him. Freedom to build a future instead of just surviving the present. That night, after he'd gone to bed, I stood outside his door and listened. Not because I was worried, but because I wanted to remember the stillness, the miracle of peace. It wasn't quiet because he was hiding. It was quiet because he felt safe. And that, to me, was worth more than every scholarship combined. It was a quiet Sunday. The kind of slow morning where nothing demanded urgency. The kind where Ethan stayed in his pajamas till noon and I let the coffee get cold on purpose, just so I could reheat it and pretend I was starting over. He was at the kitchen table, sketching again. This time it was a spinal column in perfect detail, each vertebra shaded and labeled in his increasingly precise handwriting. Then came the knock. 3 sharp raps at the front door. Not the kind of knock that says, "Hey, neighbor," but the kind that says, "You weren't expecting me and I don't plan to leave." I froze. Ethan looked up, pencil still in hand. His eyes met mine, questioning. "Stay here," I said gently. I walked to the door with a knot in my stomach. I already knew who it was. Some instinct told me before I even looked through the peephole. Ashley. Hair pulled back tight, sunglasses too big for her face, and holding a paper gift bag like that could somehow undo what she'd done. She offered a tight smile when I opened the door. "Hi." The last time she'd said that, she was sipping wine in her cluttered kitchen and casually discarding her son like last season's furniture. "Can I come in?" she asked, glancing past me like she might spot Ethan through the walls. I didn't move. She shifted on her heels. "I just want to see him." "Now you do," I said quietly. "After a year and a half of nothing." Her smile faltered. I didn't know how to reach out. I figured I'd let things settle. "Things," I repeated. "Ashley, you left your child at a shelter." Her eyes darted down. "I made a mistake." That word, mistake, landed like a slap. She looked back up. "Is he okay? I mean, is he happy?" I didn't answer that. I just opened the door wider and gestured inside. "Tea." She stepped in cautiously, like the floor might judge her. I made the tea quietly, letting the kettle fill the silence. Ashley sat at the edge of the couch like she didn't know whether to perch or collapse. When I handed her the mug, she wrapped both hands around it, staring down at the steam. "He doesn't want to see me, does he?" I sat across from her. "He stayed in his room the moment he heard your voice." Ashley nodded slowly. "I figured." "What did you expect?" I asked, unable to keep the steel from my voice. "That he'd run to the door, call you Mom, cry tears of joy." Her shoulders sagged. I don't know what I expected." We sat there for a moment, 2 women linked by blood and betrayal. One sipping tea out of guilt, the other out of exhaustion. She set the cup down. "I brought him something." She held up the gift bag. "It's just a model kit, heart and lungs. I thought he might like it." I didn't reach for it. "He doesn't need gifts," I said. "He needed a mother." Ashley winced like the words struck harder than she thought they would. I wasn't ready, she murmured. I thought I'd be stronger, but he was just different. No, I said firmly. He wasn't. He's brilliant. He's gentle. He needed someone who'd stay, and you left the second things got hard. I know, she whispered. The sound of a door creaked in the hallway. We both turned. Ethan stood there, just for a moment. He looked at her straight into her eyes and then turned and walked back into his room without a word. Ashley flinched, just slightly. He's not ready, I said, softer now. She nodded, biting her lip. Tell him I came. I didn't respond. She stood, awkwardly collecting her purse and the untouched gift bag. Thanks for the tea, she said, and it sounded like a line from a movie she didn't really believe in. I watched from the porch as she walked back to her car, the afternoon sun glinting off her windshield as she pulled away. Inside, the house was still. I found Ethan back at the kitchen table, flipping through his sketchbook like nothing had happened. I didn't ask if he was okay. I just sat across from him, quiet, present. That was enough for now. He waited until the house was dark. Until the dishes were done, the lights were low, and I'd settled on the couch with a half-read book and the soft hum of the dishwasher in the background. Ethan stood in the hallway like a shadow, barely lit by the lamp behind me. "Can I tell you something?" he asked. His voice was quiet, not scared, not angry, just even, like he'd rehearsed the sentence and decided it was time. I closed the book gently. Of course. He walked over, hands in the pockets of his sweatpants, and sat cross-legged on the armchair across from me. I waited. "I don't think she's my mom," he said. The words weren't bitter. There was no venom, no heat, just the cold clarity of a boy who had made peace with something most adults never fully do. "She had me," he continued, "but she didn't keep me. And moms, they don't throw you away." I set the book down on the coffee table carefully. "You're right." He looked at me, surprised. Like maybe he'd expected me to defend her, to soften the edges of it. "She gave birth to you, Ethan, but being a mother takes more than that. It takes showing up, even when it's hard, especially when it's hard." He nodded slowly. "I don't want to see her again," he said. "Not now, maybe not ever." I took a breath. "That's your right." He looked away then, like he didn't want me to see what came next, but I saw the way his jaw clenched, the way his fingers twisted the hem of his shirt. "I just don't want to pretend," he added. And that was the part that undid me, because he had been pretending in his own quiet ways, pretending that the hole she left didn't still echo, pretending he hadn't noticed how she looked at him like a problem she'd finally solved by walking away. I leaned forward slightly, elbows on my knees. "You never have to pretend, not with me." He nodded again, slower this time. Then he asked something I didn't expect. "Do you think she regrets it?" That question hit me harder than anything he'd said before. I wanted to say yes. I wanted to reassure him that of course she did, that no mother could look at the life he'd built and not feel the weight of her absence. But I'd seen Ashley's eyes. I'd heard the way she said mistake like she was talking about oversalting a dish, not abandoning her son. "She might," I said carefully. "But even if she does, that doesn't erase what she did. And it doesn't mean you owe her anything." He seemed to let that settle inside him. And then, so softly I almost missed it, he said, "Thanks for not making me go to her." My throat tightened. "You never have to earn love here," I whispered. "It's not conditional. You're not a test to pass or a box to check. You're just you." He didn't respond, but he sat with me a while longer, the way kids do when they've said all they can and just want to exist next to someone who won't ask more of them. Later, after he went to bed, I sat on the porch alone. The wind had picked up. Leaves danced across the driveway in scattered spirals. I thought about all the ways Ashley had broken him before he ever got the chance to know what he was made of. And even though he was thriving now, excelling, dreaming, healing, I understood something I hadn't wanted to before. Success wouldn't erase the scar she left. You don't unburn a house just because you build a new one. You build it anyway. You build it better. Stronger. You fill it with light. And you leave the door open, not for the ones who left, but for the future you chose. I spent the entire ceremony clutching my program like it was the only thing anchoring me to earth. Rows of parents and proud relatives filled the auditorium. Polished shoes, pressed suits, beaming smiles. The smell of carnations mixed with auditorium dust and cheap cologne. And there he was, Ethan, standing in line, third row from the front in his white coat. The boy who used to hide in my hallway closet was now being named a surgical resident at Cedar Ridge Medical Center. There were moments in your life where time folds, where the past and present overlap so sharply that it almost hurts. As the dean called his name, I felt it happen. "Ethan Davis," she announced, top of his class, accepted into Cedar Ridge Surgical Residency Program. The applause was thunderous, but all I could hear was the sound of my own heartbeat. He walked to the stage with measured steps, his posture straight, his eyes clear. He took the certificate, shook hands, and turned toward the crowd. Then he was handed the microphone. "I'd like to say a few words," he said, his voice steady, microphone catching the soft echo of the room. I held my breath. "My name is Ethan Davis," he began, "and I almost didn't make it here. Not because I didn't work hard, but because once upon a time, someone decided I wasn't worth the effort." A hush fell over the room. But someone else. His eyes scanned the audience until they found mine. Someone else disagreed. My throat tightened. She found me when I was quiet, when I was scared, when I didn't know what I wanted to become, just that I didn't want to disappear. There were tears on my cheeks before I could stop them. She made me soup when I hadn't eaten in days. She let me sit in silence without demanding explanations. She saw value where others saw burden. And because of that, I stand here today. He took a breath. I owe this moment, this path, and this future to one person, the woman who saved me when I thought I didn't matter. He looked right at me. To my Aunt Monica. A collective murmur rippled through the crowd, then applause, first gentle, then thunderous. I didn't stand. I couldn't. My legs wouldn't have supported me. But I smiled, tears streaming freely, hands pressed together like a prayer. Because this wasn't just his graduation. It was ours. After the ceremony, I found him outside, posing for photos with classmates, his white coat crisp under the setting sun. When he saw me, he excused himself and walked straight over. He held out the bouquet someone had handed him earlier, blue and white hydrangeas, probably chosen at random. "They're for you," he said. I took them with shaking hands. "You didn't have to say all that," I whispered. He tilted his head. "But I meant all that." And in that moment, I saw the boy he used to be and the man he was becoming woven into one. No longer hidden, no longer small, just Ethan. Mine and no one else's. The thunder had started hours ago, low and steady like distant artillery. I had just pulled a pecan pie from the oven when my phone buzzed, skittering across the countertop like it knew something I didn't. Unknown number. I almost let it go, almost. But instinct, cold and sharp, tightened in my chest. "Hello," I answered. A woman's voice crackled through the line. Calm, clinical. "Ms. Monica Rivers." "Yes. This is Nurse Alston at Brackenridge General. You're listed as the emergency contact for Ashley Davis." My world tilted slightly. I braced my hand on the edge of the counter. Ashley. I hadn't heard that name spoken to me in months, maybe longer. Not since she'd appeared on our doorstep and left just as quickly, trailing apologies she couldn't finish and guilt she wouldn't sit with. "What happened?" I asked, my voice tight. "She was involved in a single-car collision on Interstate 35, high-speed impact. We've stabilized her, but she sustained severe internal injuries. We're moving her into emergency surgery now." The words dropped like ice cubes into hot water, sinking fast and disrupting everything. "Is she conscious?" "No, intubated. We don't know if she'll survive the night." The room around me blurred slightly. I thanked her, though I didn't remember doing it, and ended the call. The silence afterward felt heavier than the storm outside. Ethan was in the living room, still in his hospital scrubs from the day's rounds, bent over an anatomy casebook. When I stepped into the doorway, he looked up immediately. I didn't speak. Didn't have to. He set the book down and stood. "What happened?" I walked over slowly, sat across from him, and gripped the arm of the chair. "It's your mother." He blinked but said nothing. "There was a car accident. They don't think she's going to make it through the night." I paused. "The hospital called me." He stood still, absorbing every word like a physician takes a history, measured, analytical, waiting for the pieces to mean something. "Then why'd they call you?" "She listed me as her emergency contact. Still, somehow." That made him flinch almost imperceptibly, but I saw it. "And you're telling me because," I inhaled sharply, "because they need someone, they're short-staffed. And you're a trained surgical resident at Cedar Ridge with recent trauma experience." He stared at me, unblinking. His silence wasn't cold, it was calculation, emotional triage. "She's not my mother," he said. "No," I said gently. "She's not, but you're my son, and I'm asking." His jaw worked silently for a second, like the muscles were weighing something heavier than bone. I softened my voice. "I know you don't owe her anything. I know she doesn't deserve it. But this isn't about her, Ethan. It's about who you are now." That word hung in the air like a challenge. You, not who she made you, who you chose to become. We drove through rain that fell like judgment, loud and unrelenting. In the passenger seat, Ethan was silent, white coat folded neatly in his lap like a loaded question. At one red light, he finally spoke. "She left me in a shelter, Monica." I nodded. "I know. I sat on a cot for 3 nights. I didn't eat. I didn't sleep." My grip on the wheel tightened. And I thought, if my own mother can walk away, maybe I was the problem. "You weren't," I said quickly. He looked at me not with anger, but something more dangerous, understanding. "I know that now, but knowing it doesn't erase it." "No," I whispered, "it doesn't. But you still want me to save her. I want you to do what feels right to you, but if I'm honest, yes, I want you to try." He turned back toward the window, said nothing else. At the ER, they recognized him immediately, young, competent, already halfway through his rotations. "We're prepping for splenic repair and abdominal hemorrhage," a nurse said. "We could use a second assist. Are you scrubbed?" He nodded. "Give me 5 minutes." I watched him disappear through those sterile doors, tall and composed, his steps steady with purpose. The child Ashley abandoned didn't walk into that OR. A man did. A man she made and broke. A man I helped rebuild. And as I sank into the cold plastic chair in the waiting room, my heart cracked with the weight of it. He wasn't doing this for her. He was doing it despite her. And maybe that was the greatest justice of all. The surgery took 3 hours. I watched the clock like it might offer answers, like time itself could hint at whether forgiveness was being stitched alongside flesh. Every 30 minutes, a nurse passed through the waiting room with another update, not directly to me, but to the board. I read between the lines. Stable vitals. Splenic control achieved. Blood pressure improving. And though the storm had passed outside, the one inside me raged on. Ethan was in that room with her, gloved, masked, methodical, saving the life of the woman who had once discarded his like it meant nothing. There was a kind of cruelty in that symmetry, but also, maybe, grace. He came out just after midnight, removing his surgical cap and wiping his forehead with the sleeve of his coat. "She made it," he said simply. No pride, no warmth, just the facts. "She'll be in recovery for a few days. They had to remove the spleen, repair the liver lacerations, a few broken ribs. She'll live." I stood, searching his face for something, anything, that would show me what this cost him. "Are you okay?" I asked softly. He looked at me with that same detached professionalism I'd seen in every other hospital hallway. "I did what needed to be done," he said. "Nothing more." And with that, he turned and walked past me toward the exit into the cold, into himself. 3 days later, I returned to the hospital. Ashley had stabilized. She was conscious. Groggy, yes, but aware. She looked small in the hospital bed, smaller than I remembered. Her hair unwashed, skin pale against the white sheets. Machines beeped in quiet rhythm around her. I stepped into the room without knocking. She turned her head slowly. "Monica!" Her voice was a breath. I didn't respond at first. I pulled the chair closer to the bed and sat. She stared at the ceiling. "They said I almost died." "You did." "Was it him?" I waited. "Yes." Silence, her lips trembled. "He saved me." I didn't answer directly. She turned her head toward me, eyes brimming now. "Why?" I leaned forward, not cruelly, but clearly. "Because I asked him to." That broke her, not the surgery, not the trauma, that. Her body shook with sobs she couldn't fully cry through the pain meds. Her shoulders hitched, her hands clutched the edge of the blanket like she might fall through the mattress and vanish. "I didn't mean to, I wasn't strong enough." "You made a choice," I said, "and so did he. I wanted to come back to fix it. You can't." She closed her eyes, tears leaking down her temples. "He'll never forgive me." I didn't argue, because forgiveness wasn't mine to offer. That evening, back at home, Ethan was sitting on the porch, hoodie pulled over his head, sketchbook in his lap. I sat beside him quietly. "She asked if you'd forgive her," I said eventually. He didn't look up from his drawing. "What did you tell her?" "That it wasn't mine to give." He nodded once, then paused his pencil midline. She's alive, he said, not because she's my mother, but because you asked me to. I turned to him, heart clenching at the composure in his voice. She needed saving, he continued, but that doesn't mean she gets a second chance at me. I reached over, resting my hand over his gently. I know. He looked at me then, eyes calm. I didn't do it for her. I did it for the person who stayed. And with that, he returned to shading the left ventricle of the heart on the page, steady and unflinching. She didn't call it first. She sent a card. One of those drugstore sympathy-style things with a photo of a dove and vague words about beginnings. Inside, her handwriting was small and tight. I don't know how to undo what I've done, but I know I want to try. Ashley. No mom, no love. Just her name. Ethan read it once. He didn't throw it away, but he didn't put it anywhere special either. Just slid it under a stack of books on his desk where it stayed, pressed between anatomy texts and unopened mail like it didn't quite deserve to be mourned or remembered. A week later, she tried calling. I answered. Hi, she said. Her voice was slow, still hoarse from the breathing tube. Hi, I returned. I just wanted to see how he's doing. He's fine. A pause. And you, are you okay? I'm not the one you left, I said quietly. Silence. I want to try again, Monica, she said. Not to erase what happened, I know I can't, but maybe I can build something new. You don't build with someone you discarded, I replied, my tone flat. You don't get to come back because the person you hurt turned out strong. Another pause. Can you at least tell him I called? I stared out the window. I'll tell him, I said, but I won't push him. And I didn't. In the weeks that followed, she sent more things, a small plant, a book on heart surgery, saw it and thought of you, the note said. Once, even a photo of Ethan as a toddler tucked inside a letter about how she used to braid his hair after baths and sing to him when he had nightmares. He glanced at the photo. His expression didn't change. I don't remember that, he said, placing it on the counter, walking away. I let it sit for a few days before tucking it into a drawer. Not because he needed to remember, but because I needed to remember why I kept fighting for his boundaries. We were back to our rhythm. Late nights at the kitchen table, sketching or studying, early mornings over coffee and yogurt. He had started his residency rotation, and though the hours were brutal, he came home with that tired but lit-up look I'd only seen in people who truly loved what they did. He was building something. Not just a career, but a foundation, unshakable, quietly proud. One evening over takeout, I asked, "Do you ever think about seeing her again?" He didn't answer right away. Then, "Not really." "You're allowed not to," he nodded. "I know. Even if she changes, even if she's sorry." "I'm not angry," he said. "Not anymore." "But you're not ready," I finished. "I'm not interested," he said. And there was something about that word, interested, that struck me harder than if he'd said he hated her. Because forgiveness can sometimes be mistaken for a reunion, a clean slate. But Ethan wasn't asking for closure. He'd already closed the door. I got one last call from Ashley a few weeks later. "I was thinking of coming by," she said, "just to leave something for him, maybe outside." "Don't," I said. She didn't argue, she just sighed. "I really did love him, you know." "I believe you," I said softly. "But love without action isn't love, it's just guilt." And with that, I hung up. Not out of cruelty, out of clarity. Ethan deserved more than a half-present mother trying to rewrite her ending. He had already written his own. The new hospital wing smelled like promise. Fresh paint, polished floors, sunlight streaming through oversized windows. Every detail had been chosen carefully, walls painted in calming blues and warm yellows, murals of animals and galaxies and underwater reefs. Even the examination tables had rounded corners, like the place had been built to soothe instead of scare. I stood near the back of the crowd, out of the spotlight, watching as they unveiled the plaque mounted on the entry wall. The Monica Rivers Pediatric Wing below it, a simple inscription, in honor of the woman who believed first, stayed always, and saved more than just one life. I didn't cry right away. Not until Ethan stepped up to the podium, tall and sure in his white coat, a stethoscope slung over his shoulders like a medal earned in battle. He cleared his throat. The room hushed. "I was left behind once," he said. No introduction. No soft start, just the truth. Not everyone knows that about me. It's not a story I tell at fundraisers or faculty dinners, but it's the reason I'm standing here now. He looked around, locking eyes with people who had only known the version of him that came later, the polished, brilliant surgeon, the prodigy. I was abandoned, told I wasn't right, that I wasn't enough. I sat in a shelter 3 days without answers, and I truly believed my life had already been decided. His gaze flicked to mine, just for a second. And then someone found me. A pause. She didn't come because it was convenient. She came because I mattered. Before the grades, before the ribbons, before the scholarships. I mattered, and that saved me. There was a soft rustle in the crowd, tissues, muffled breaths, someone whispering, "Wow." Ethan's voice didn't waver. "This wing exists because of her, because she believed in children who don't yet know their value, because she showed me that showing up is the greatest medicine there is." He stepped down to applause, modest as ever, giving a quick nod to the donors, the board members, the press. Then he walked toward me, took my hand, and whispered, "This is yours." We toured the wing after most people had cleared out. In each room, I could feel his imprint. Little touches he'd added, blankets folded just so, calming lights on dimmers, bookshelves stocked with stories that healed in their own quiet ways. We paused in the last room, a play therapy space with an oversized chalkboard wall. He handed me a piece of chalk and gestured to the blank surface. "Write something," he said. I hesitated. Then slowly I wrote, "You are not broken, you are beginning." He smiled, reading it over my shoulder. "Perfect." That night we sat on the back porch, just like we used to, watching the moon hang low above the rooftops. "It still gets to me," I said quietly, "what she did." Ethan nodded, eyes on the horizon. "Me too. But I look at you now," I continued, "and I realize she didn't win." He looked at me, expression soft. "No, you did." I reached over and squeezed his hand. "We did." The wind picked up, brushing the edge of his coat. "You didn't just survive her," I whispered. "You became someone who saves others every day." He didn't speak, but the look he gave me said everything. Gratitude, peace, and maybe, finally, freedom. If you've ever had someone believe in you when you couldn't believe in yourself, tell me about it in the comments. And if you've ever been that person for someone else, I hope you know, the world is better because of you. Wherever you're watching from, thank you for staying until the end. Justice isn't always loud. Sometimes it walks into a hospital wearing a white coat and saves a life without saying a word.